Hello, communications class. This is my speech for communications 110055. These are my 4 people who are listening to my speech. I'm going to just put the camera right here. Alright, thanks for coming. Improv, there are no scripts, there is no plan, and nobody knows what's going to happen. Improv comedy is created in the moment and will happen in 2 ways. There are 2 types of improv comedy. There's short form and then there's long form. I'm about to tell you about the latter. In long form comedy, a comedic scene is created by improvisers who use specific guidelines to help move a scene forward and allow people to participate collaboratively to develop an idea without any pre-planning. These techniques have been used by such famous comedic personalities as Amy Poehler, Steve Carell, Chris Farley, Mike Myers, and hundreds of others. Now I'm going to show you how to create a long-form improvised scene by 1. Establishing a base reality through agreement, developing a game, and by digging into develop a game by digging into an unusual moment and transitioning to a new scene or moment. And I will give you some examples of things to avoid when performing improv. Base reality includes the scene-specific information, where a scene will take place. It's usually based on a suggestion from the audience to establish a scene. The suggestion is to make sure that the audience knows that this scene is improvised. It's not like we didn't just plan this ahead, we didn't have this idea coming into this. So the base reality is where the scene takes place and who the characters are and what is occurring in the scene. Scene is usually established with a declarative line and continued by other members performing using the yes and thing. So just I agree with that, and here's some additional information to add to that scene. A good declarative statement, or a deck line, as is kind of the short term for it, will establish a scene and provide a great deal of information to other members of the scene to start off. A good example is, it sure is a hot day in this beach, I hope the water is cold. So you get a location, what everyone's doing, and kind of move the scene along in that way. A bad declarative statement might be oh, well, it's just you and me here, because there's no information, it's just these 2 people are alone, what are they doing? A scene could go anywhere. So once you have that, you want to keep moving forward and establishing new information, and being true to the scene using yes and. So things to avoid in this particular section is to just avoiding starting a scene with a question, because it's putting a lot of pressure on your partner to provide answers and kind of shifting the responsibility, I guess. And a bad idea is to negate a premise. So somebody says check out this cool hat, and the other person's oh, you're not wearing a hat. It's oh, well, you just didn't, you move the scene forward, you kind of stopped anything that could have happened with that. Although look at this cool hat isn't a great deck line, it's decent though. So next from there, we want to move on to the game. And the game is what makes a scene funny. So a simplified way of explaining the game is if you've ever seen a Monty Python sketch or whatever, it's whatever makes that scene go. So there's this one scene where this father is disappointed that his son is in the coal industry, and he's wishes that he was a proud actor and stuff, and I don't know, the idea is that it's switched, you would expect that the coal mining dad would be disapproving of his son participating in the arts and stuff, but this is it's kind of the opposite. Another one is the argument scene, where it's you don't expect someone to pay to go for an argument, or something like that. Unlike sports or a recreational activity, it's not competitive, it's just it's usually started by finding something unusual in a scene and then building using, instead of yes and, we switch to if then what statements. A game is essentially what makes a comedy scene funny. If you think about the Chris Farley sketch, for another example, where he lived in a van down by a river, the comedy in that scene is derived by how unfit Chris is to help that situation. It keeps escalating by his statements oh, I'm living off government cheese, or X, Y, and Z, and that's how it kind of moves forward. They rely on funny habits of characters. Usually a scene will go along yes and something funny will happen, and that's called the first unusual thing, and then that's built off of using the game, continuing to establish higher and higher stakes until it reaches a logical conclusion. Usually scenes don't last any more than like 5 to 10 minutes because you get kind of diminishing returns on like taking scenes up a notch. So usually you want to like have someone will cut it off. I mean, it's long form and you can keep moving with other stuff, but you usually want to like end a scene and like move on to a new kind of idea or whatever, or explore like maybe the same story but in a different part of that story. So usually people like run across the stage to clear a scene, or you can also like grab someone and tag them out. There's like other characters can move forward and backward in time, which is kind of fun sometimes. It's usually just start a new base reality, find another funny thing, build a game again, and that's kind of the method you kind of move through in like doing like a long improv show. So you can go like forward in time and backward in time, kind of wherever from that. But kind of the deal with like ending a scene is if you think you should end a scene, you probably should have already ended it like 15 seconds ago. Because if it carries on too long, you like there's definitely going to be like too much. Like people are not going to find it funny. They're going to get kind of tired of it. So that's kind of like the whole idea encompassing. Like it's very like linear, and there's a lot of like there's a lot of practice that goes into making it good, like knowing your partner and so forth. But there's a lot of things you want to avoid when doing it. It's like typically it's like a team effort. So like versus like where you have like a stand-up comedian who just tells jokes. In improv, you're all participating, and you want to make sure that you're supporting each other so that everything moves forward and everyone is kind of like ideas get like off the ground, and like so it, like everyone kind of establishes their own like kind of niche in what's happening. So it's not good to like try to be a comedian, try to tell jokes, or like kind of pick apart like bad like what everyone's doing. And you don't want to, and then there's like certain scenes you want to avoid too. So you don't want to try to like, teach, or you don't want to like talk about characters that aren't there, because that just kind of, it doesn't make for like an interesting like setting. Generally speaking, there are no rules, but scenes like those will like kind of limit where you can go, and they'll just kind of end quickly and not really. It should be more about like the characters and their like interactions with each other. So, in conclusion, improv can be a hilarious and entertaining performance method to both watch and perform. It's not easy to create funny scenes from nothing, but with practice, patience, and some adherence to these guidelines, you can be an improviser too. And it's all about establishing a base reality, finding a game, and knowing when to move on to the next idea. If you avoid some of the techniques I mentioned, you could be successful at improv as well. I think people view improv as a thing that just happens and that people can just do it and be funny. But there's a lot of techniques and stuff that kind of goes behind the scenes that kind of moves it forward and makes comedy that's available to like entertain people. And that's all that I have. Thank you. Cool.
Can we do an improv scene now?
We could try.
All right.
A lot of your improv scenes